In a small, quiet town, life moved at its own steady pace. The kind of town where everyone knew each other, and the courthouse was a place of routine. A place where cases were resolved, disputes settled, and justice carried out according to the law. But one case arrived that would disrupt all of that. A case that would leave everyone involved questioning not just the legal system, but the very nature of truth, observation, and responsibility. At the center of it was a child, no more than 10 or 11 years old. On the day they entered the courtroom, their small figure seemed almost fragile among the towering adults, lawyers, and officers who surrounded them. But what this child would reveal was anything but ordinary. They had witnessed events, moments of conflict and potential harm. Yet when asked who had committed them, the answer was always the same: nobody. The courtroom fell silent as the child spoke. They described incidents in vivid detail. Arguments that escalated, objects that were damaged, moments of fear and tension that seemed to ripple through the town. They recounted conversations, body language, and the timing of each event. Every word carried clarity, as if a child had been watching from a vantage point no adult could occupy. Yet, when pressed to identify a person responsible, the child refused. Nobody. Lawyers were stunned, police officers were baffled. The system relies on human accountability, on identifying a perpetrator so that justice can be applied. But here, every piece of testimony pointed to actions and outcomes without a culprit. Objects moved, doors opened or slammed, conflicts escalated, and consequences followed, all as if circumstances themselves had acted independently of human hands. Psychologists and child experts were brought in to understand what was happening. Some suggested the child's mind might be interpreting events symbolically, that they were recounting accidents or misunderstandings in the language of wrongdoing. Others proposed the possibility of fear or influence, that the child had been coached or was protecting someone. But none of these explanations fit when the child spoke with such conviction and precision, recalling details that only a witness could have known. As the testimony continued, the courtroom became tense. Adults leaned forward, eyes fixed on the child, trying to reconcile what they were hearing with the reality they understood. The child described outcomes and sequences of events with a clarity that was unsettling. The injuries, the arguments, the mishaps, all had happened, yet there was no villain, no human agent behind them. The events seemed almost autonomous, as though the world itself had acted in ways that defied conventional logic. The paradox fascinated the public. Journalists, townspeople, and online observers debated endlessly. Some argued it was a profound lesson in perception, showing that sometimes consequences unfold without direct human intent. Others felt it was a metaphor for the unpredictable nature of life, where responsibility is not always clear and accountability cannot always be assigned. Still, the factual nature of the child's testimony made it impossible to dismiss entirely. The case became more than a courtroom drama. It became a philosophical puzzle. What does it mean to witness, to testify, when there is no one to accuse? How do you administer justice when the law is designed to target human action, but the evidence suggests events acted independently of human choice? And perhaps most unsettling, how often in life do outcomes occur, and who is truly responsible when nobody can be named? Throughout the proceedings, observers noted the child's composure. Despite the weight of their testimony and the bewilderment of the adults around them, the child remained calm, almost matter of fact. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no fear in recounting events, only a steady, unwavering account of what had been seen and the insistence that nobody was to blame. By the time the case concluded, the courtroom was left with more questions than answers. The incidents had occurred, witnesses had corroborated certain details, yet no perpetrator had been identified. Legal systems, structured to assign guilt and deliver justice, had no framework for this situation. And in that void, the child's testimony left a haunting message. Sometimes, the world unfolds without clear causes, and not every outcome can be traced to human intent. Years later, the story is still remembered in the town. It serves as a reminder that observation does not always lead to prosecution, and that some truths cannot be reduced to names and faces. The child who testified against nobody taught the adults around them, and anyone who hears the story, a lesson about the limits of human understanding. Events can occur, consequences can unfold, and yet no one may be responsible. It is a case that lingers in the mind, challenging how we assign blame, understand causality, and interpret reality. It asks uncomfortable questions. How much control do we really have over the world? How often do we mistake accidents, coincidences, or the course of events for deliberate actions? And if someone or something witnesses it all. What does it mean when there is nobody to testify against? The child who testified against nobody reminds us that life is not always neat, that justice cannot always be applied, and that the world can be stranger, more chaotic, and more unpredictable than we are prepared to accept. And perhaps the most unsettling lesson of all is that sometimes the truth exists in the space between observation and culpability, in moments where no one is to blame, and yet everything is witnessed.